That's the truth for me. I love the people I work with and the people who are important to me because they are family. At 69, Rotten finally tells them what their names are. Not the well-known stories you might expect, but dark, strange, frightening souls that are like his own life. Come with us as we talk about the 6 artists who had a big impact on him and why. Let's go. Nico. Johnny Rotten thinks Nico is the best person in the world. You did hear that right. Nico, the mysterious chanteuse and solo artist who was in the Velvet Underground, said that the man who would become the angry voice of punk had a deep love for music. In 1974, Rotten found her solo album The Marble Index in a dusty London record store. That was the start of it all for him. It was shocking to hear for the first time. The record was sad, didn't sell well, and had nothing to do with the current musical trends. After the fact, Rotten said that she sounds like she's dead but still more alive than everyone else. I've never heard a sound so real. Others wrote her off as hard to reach, but Rotten heard the harsh, unpolished, and brave truth. It wasn't just respect, it was awe at how she turned sadness into art. The difference between Rotten's devotion and that of his friends made it even more shocking. Many punk fans said their influences came from American garage bands or New York's CBGB scene, but Rotten said sounds like Nico's were what really inspired him. He saw her as a deeper kind of rebellion, not against music or style, but against the spirit. According to him, she never gave up on her goals, tried to be liked, or said sorry for being hard to understand. That stubborn lack of fear became his model. Nico showed him that music could be deeply real even when it upset, shocked, or even turned people off. It got worse for Rotten when the Sex Pistols were popular. He would lay the Marble Index over and over again, thinking about how it used quiet in a scary way and how it wouldn't settle into anything comfortable. On stage, those lessons were still useful. Nico's approach was echoed in his rough vocal delivery, his tense pauses, and his failure to try to win over the crowd. The Pistols were known as the embodiment of chaos, but Rotten quietly brought Nico's artistic discipline to every show. Her sad life only made him more interested in her. Nico had trouble with heroin addiction, fell out of favor with most people, and died quickly in Ibiza in 1988 after a bike accident. For Rotten, her story was both a warning and proof. It showed the terrible price of not giving in, but it also showed how art that doesn't give in will last forever. Unlike pop stars who go out of style, Nico stayed haunting and famous for a long time. Rotten admired that sacrifice, maybe because he had also chosen the harder path all his life. Nico was more than just a source of memories by the time Rotten was 69 years old. It was what made him decent. He still talks about her music as if it were the best, showing that honest artists are more important than sales or praise. He freely contrasts his own choices, like declining to bring the Sex Pistols back together for quick cash, with Nico's honest ways. She would always tell him that an artist's job is not to comfort, but to confront. Johnny Rotten has a surprising list of his favorite singers. Nico should not be seen as an odd choice at the top of the list. It shows everything about his artistic DNA. Nico wasn't just a singer to him. She always taught me how to be rebellious, honest, and bold in my own expression. Neil Young. Neil Young is number 2 on Rotten's list of shocking movies. Taken aback? You need to be. The man's love for a Canadian folk rocker seems almost impossible for someone who spit hatred at the establishment. But for Johnny Rotten, Neil Young was live proof that real rebellion could last by always coming up with new ideas. He met Neil Young around the middle of the 1970s, just as his own success was about to take off. Most people his age were into glam rock and glitter, or they were into the raw edge of American garage bands. Rotten, on the other hand, was looking for something deeper. He found it in Young's sad 1975 record Tonight's the Night, which he wrote after 2 of his best friends died of drug overdoses. For casual ears, the record sounded broken and even sad, but to Rotten, it sounded brutally honest, like the kind of unfiltered truth he thought music should give. From that point on, the addiction got worse. Steve Jones, guitarist for the Sex Pistols, says that Rotten would play Tonight's the Night over and over again, saying, "This guy doesn't care if people like what he's doing." That one line said everything Young and Rotten had in common. At a time when most artists were trying to get hits, this person was ready to lose his fans in order to be honest. It was a big surprise for Rotten. Making noise wasn't the only thing that rebels did. It was about being brave enough to be hated. Young's volatility was what made Rotten love him so much. While bands like the Rolling Stones used the same riffs over and over, Young would suddenly switch from folk songs to heavy rock, electronic experiments to country detours. Rotten liked how brave this evolution was. Neil Young told Rolling Stone in 1980 that he changes his mind every time someone thinks they understand him. That wasn't inconsistent for Rotten, it was brave. It showed that an artist could live and even do well by throwing away the plan and not taking the same path twice. Because of this philosophy, Rotten chose to work in certain fields. When the Sex Pistols broke up in 1978, record companies offered huge sums of money to get the band back together. A lot of bands would have jumped at the chance. Rotten said no. He thought that repeating the Guns would have been the worst thing that could have happened to the punk spirit. Instead, he built a public image by diving into harsh sounds, long songs, and unknown territory. Like Young, he'd rather make people think and feel than become a nostalgia act. It was a tougher path, but he thought it was the only honest one. Rotten had more respect for Young after seeing him fight with the music business. In the 1980s, Young was sued by his own record label for putting out songs that they thought wouldn't sell well. For most, this was the end of their career. Rotten thought it was brave. This artist was ready to lose everything and be looked down upon by everyone just to stay true to himself. It reminded me of the fights Rotten had with managers, reporters, and fans who wanted him to always play the stereotypical Johnny Rotten. Young showed that resistance was more important than following the rules if you wanted to survive. Even after decades, the respect hasn't gone away. Even though he is 69 years old, Rotten still uses Neil Young to support the choices he has made. He compares Young to rock stars who changed their concerts into jukeboxes of old hits, playing the same songs over and over again. Young, on the other hand, was always destroying his own stories to make new ones. Things Rotten admired most were people who were always on the move and wouldn't let success hold them back. So Neil Young is in second place, not because of his style or ideas, but for a more important reason. As he showed Rotten, the hardest thing to fight against is yourself, your comfort, the same things over and over, and the allure of easy money. Rotten learned that lesson as a child, and even now, at age 69, he still judges his decisions by that example. Generator by Van der Graaf. In third place, Rotten picked Van der Graaf Generator, which is probably the most surprising choice of all of them. A complicated and showy progressive rock band, exactly the kind of music that punk was meant to kill. But Johnny Rotten didn't see them as enemies, but true love. He didn't hear them taking breaks from their work. He heard raw feeling that was deep. Rest up in sophistication. Rotten was found in 1975 at a party at a friend's house. He stood still when the record Pawn Hearts started playing while other people talked and drank. I got lost in the music, which was both big and wild. Then Peter Hamill's voice came in. It was sharp, desperate, and almost out of control. After a while, Rotten said, "That man screams like his life depends on it, but he's doing it over these amazing musical landscapes." It has both rock and classical power. What that response says it all. Van der Graaf Generator showed in Rotten that intensity wasn't just 3 chords and a sneer, it could also live in complexity. For Rotten, what made the band interesting wasn't how technically impressive they were, but how honest every note was. In the 1970s, many bands in Prague were busy showing off their skill by playing a lot of solos to impress people. Van der Graaf Generators were not the same. It was never sterile that they were precise. It was rough, emotional, and freeing. It was called Beautiful Violence by Rotten, and it was music that held anger and truth but turned it into art. This was like a doorway into a new world for a teenager who was looking for a sound that fit his anger and grief. The effect showed up quickly. Even when the gunshots stopped for a moment, Rotten's stage appearance had hints of Hamill's acting. He looked at how Hamill stretched words, how he used dynamics to make the tension stronger, and how the fact that he was weak made the anger even stronger. Later, in 1978, Rotten told Melody Maker, "Peter Hamill taught me that you can be deep and honest at the same time." He learned this lesson well, and it helped him as he went through his experimental years with his public image stolen. Some people thought Rotten betrayed punk when he started to use longer songs and strange arrangements with Peel. He thought it was punk at its core, though, because it wouldn't take a corner. The Van der Graaf Generator had shown him that being smart didn't make music less dangerous. Instead, it made it more dangerous. To defend his Prague sympathies against the purist punks, he said that simplicity without feeling was pointless, but honesty and complexity could go even deeper. Some fans didn't understand his position, but it showed how creative he was with music. Van der Graaf Generator also played on Rotten's desire to break the rules, whether those rules came from popular rock or punk. He thought Hamill and his band were weird because they were making music that wasn't on the charts but was also too powerful to ignore. Rotten saw fellow travelers in them, artists who were willing to turn off viewers to say something true. Even now at age 69, Rotten still uses Van der Graaf generator to show that punk and prog weren't rivals, but rather secret friends. Both were responses to boring commercial rock. They both tried to get people out of their comfort zones, and they both put truth over acceptance. When Rotten heard Hamill's scream, it was just as punk as anything he ever did with the guns. It's not a joke or comedy when Johnny Rotten puts Van der Graaf generator at number 3. This serves as a warning that the most shocking influences are often the ones that break rules we thought were impossible to be broken. He didn't see prog as a threat. It showed that rebellion could look like a lot of different things, even one as dramatic and complicated as Peter Hamill's. Hey, Lee Scratch Perry. At number 4, Johnny Rotten takes us away from the grey streets of London and into the studios in Kingston, Jamaica, which are full of smoke. Lee Scratch Perry, the strange producer who turned reggae music on its head and made dub music like a mad scientist, is his pick. Porter wasn't just another artist to Rotten. He showed that the studio itself could be used to fight back. Rotten first heard Perry's music at a flat in Notting Hill in the middle of the 1970s. When a friend dropped the needle on one of Perry's dub attempts, Rotten was glued to the record. There was no smooth production in the room. It was full of echo, reverb, and sounds that seemed to fall in on themselves. Later, Rotten said, "This man is turning music instant."